Hello and welcome back to the ProCycle YouTube channel. I'm Tom, and today we're going to be going over how to remove the OE stator out of a TW200, and we're going to be installing a high output model from Ricks Motorsports. And for those of you that are curious why you'd want to upgrade or replace your stator, a bad stator is not going to charge your battery properly. It's not going to allow all of your electrical components to run and function properly. Upgrading to a higher output like this one here, which by the way has been successful so far, will allow you to run, a ton of heated gear, a bunch of auxiliary lights, accessory plugins, you name it. Anything that uses electricity is going to benefit from a higher output stator. Let's go ahead and start by draining the oil and then clean the area where the case half meets the outer case cover. We don't want any dirt, debris kind of getting down into the inside of the engine. Go ahead and mark the position of your shifter and then remove it with a 10mm wrench. Then, in a crisscross pattern, remove all the case bolts with an 8mm socket. To remove this case cover, we're going to need to loosen up the bolt holding the bracket in place with an 18mm socket. Now pull the case cover off, swing it out of the way so we can disconnect the stator and remove the gasket. Don't forget to go ahead and clean off any debris or deposits on the flywheel hub. And let's take this time to go ahead and clean the gasket mating surfaces on the engine case half and the side cover. Next, use a Phillips screwdriver to remove the left side panel so we can gain access to the stator plug connector, and then go ahead and cut the zip ties holding the stator wire to the frame. In order to gain access to the stator plug connector, we'll need to remove the regulator rectifier. Use a 8mm socket to remove the two bolts holding it down. This cable here comes up and then feeds into the master harness here, but they run right underneath here, so we got to pull these out, lift it up, unplug them, get the connectors out. So your main 6-wire harness is actually going to come to two different plugs here. This 4-pin with 4 white wires, or 3 white wires, sorry, and then this 2-pin here with the green and brown. You'll see they're coming up in the same lead and they split off. You don't normally have to take this off, but I want to because I want to deep clean that case cover where the sprocket is. Just built up with grease and gunk. All this just to get these plugs out. All right. So now we got to pry this apart so we can pull these out. Give it a little tug. We got this one out, these two out. And replace this seal. There's a little oil galley that sends oil through here into here, and that lubes that. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let me pull this out. Let me pull this out. Replacement components from Rick. It's our higher output stator. 5mm hex key. Be careful when you're doing this because these edges, they are like a razor blade. They will skin your knuckles. Some RTB in there, keeps that sealed. Now, if you get to this point and you're opting to replace those countershaft seals, I highly recommend you go to Harbor Freight or somewhere and get a impact screwdriver set. The only time you really ever need to replace these countershaft seals is if they show signs of being damaged or if they're leaking. Ours was leaking a little bit, and then it looked like the lip was kind of folded in on itself. If you're replacing the countershaft seals like we are here, go ahead and take a flat blade screwdriver, stick it into the opening of the seal, and just gently pry out, making sure that you're not going to scratch or gouge the case. If you don't have a special seal driver tool, you can always use a bearing or a socket that's the same diameter as the seal and just gently tap it in. Now go ahead and put a little bit of oil on that countershaft seal and then put the retaining plate back on. Now before we can fully assemble the stator and the pickup coil back into the side case cover, you're going to need some silicone liquid gasket like this 3-bond we have here. It's great OE approved stuff. You're going to need to apply some down into the little valleys where the rubber grommets on the leads coming off of the stator and the pickup coil will seat into. Next, you'll also go ahead and reinsert the 3 bolts that came off, and the torque specs for those bolts are going to be 2.9 foot-pounds, about 3 foot-pounds, and then the hold down clamp for the pickup coil is 5 foot-pounds. And go ahead and apply a little bit of Loctite to all of those bolts before you get carried away. Now that we have the stator and the pickup coil installed, let's go ahead and take a little bit of rubbing alcohol and clean the gasket mating surface. Now we can get started with replacing the inner countershaft seal. Loosen the rear tire axle to give you some slack in the chain. Next, remove the front sprocket using a 10mm socket. Now, you can remove the seal using a right angle pick. Use a little bit of plastic wrap to protect the new seal from the sharp machined edges. Apply some oil to the wrap, then slide your new seal on. Be careful as those edges are very sharp. If you don't have a proper seal driver, a good piece of Schedule 80 plumbing pipe is a great substitute. Gently tap your driver with a hammer to evenly seat your new seal. The seal will sit flush with the case when you're finished. And we went ahead and installed a new 14-tooth sprocket. The sprocket bolt torque specs are 7.2 foot-pounds with blue Loctite. Now you can go ahead and readjust your chain and tighten your rear axle back down. Next, apply your new ProCycle gasket to the side cover. Use the metal dowel pins to help hold the gasket in place while you go to install the cover. When installing the cover, be mindful that the wires need to be routed through the cavity above the sprocket housing. I point to where it needs to go in the video. It's kind of obvious once you get to this step. Before you get started tightening down the side cover, make sure that it is seated evenly on the engine. Our TW came with 2 different length bolts in the middle of the side cover. The shorter of the 2 goes into the top hole and the longer bolt goes into the bottom hole. Starting with these 2 center bolts, zigzag your way around the cover, tightening the bolts to 5.1 foot-pounds. We got our cables all plugged back in now. I'm going to tighten this down. So rear airbox bolts are in. Tighten this last front one. Now we need to add some zip ties to hold the bars back. Now you can put your side panel and your seat back on the bike, followed by your shifter. Now we've got a few things left to do and then we're done. Tighten up that foot peg bolt to 43 foot-pounds. Double check all of your work. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe to the newsletter. And as always, remember, your adventure begins here.